The question I have is, there's been a lot of thought given to how these technologies are going to disrupt the public schools. Not as much on the private school side, right? And I think that the private schools are also going to be profoundly affected by these changes, right? I mean, if there's a revolution coming, it's going to hit everyone. The implications for improving quality and for possibly lowering cost, right? Substituting technology for labor and whatnot. I just wondered if maybe Terry, you and Curtis could comment on that, because it seems to me that, you know, if the asteroid's coming, it's going to hit the private schools as well, unless they adapt. Everyone is obviously going to have to adapt.
Well, you know, bottom line is I don't know exactly. I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going to happen with the private schools. Obviously, it's to their advantage to get with the program, right, and take advantage of this. If you look in at the higher education level, University of Phoenix, right, they're out there. And people can sort of, sometimes, you know, the elitists can sort of joke about the University of Phoenix degree. Yeah, right. All around the country, higher education institutions are getting on this bandwagon. They're all offering online options, right? This is the wave of the future. And it's been led by private institutions, right? So I would expect private institutions at the K-12 level to get going on this because they have to. They live in a competitive environment.
Okay. I would add, though, that we've got to be careful that we don't imagine going from one standard dominant arrangement to another standard dominant arrangement. The core message coming out of a generation, the millennials, who are more different from each other and more different from previous generations than at any time in our history, is that we have to be open to and welcome differentiation. So in a way, it's like we need to cut a new deal. That the folks who learn in traditional ways, and that still may be, I don't know, 20, 25, maybe even 30% of young people, and some of those private schools cater particularly to those that learn a certain way, that's fine. That's a part of the market, and we shouldn't be trying to, from the outside, undermine that, and it may be also true in the public school sector. But the deal we need to cut is we're not going to say that that's inappropriate if that's what the market wants, but you've got to stop being intolerant of the new and different stuff that is taking place in a wider scope of learning kind of strategies out here. Yeah, go ahead.
Just two examples, because we don't differentiate. We have virtual schools that are private and public that are our members, and those of you that know the Holton Arms School is one of those traditional all-women's schools that's very highly regarded nationally as a private school. They just started the first virtual school network for other private, highly regarded girls' schools. And then the other example is there's the first national Catholic private school that is a virtual school online. It's nationwide. So it's happening.
I'm Representative Bob Scarpel out of North Dakota, and I think every legislator should hear this presentation, quite frankly. I recently read a statistic, and I'd like to know if you'd comment on it. I'd like to hear your comments on it, that said that half of what a student learns in their first year in high school is obsolete by the time they complete their junior year in high school. And if that, in fact, is true, I mean, obviously we need to change how we educate students. But how do we get it done fast enough, quite frankly?
Go ahead.
Isn't the whole challenge here is to cultivate succeeding generations that know how to learn, how to adapt, because we can find out the knowledge that's turning over at the rate you suggest. But if we just, on the one hand, condition young people to think that they can't know anything we don't tell them, then they don't have that skill. And that's still what we sort of do in most of K-12 practice. We kind of condition them, despite the fact that these young people do know how to learn. I was in front of a, kind of combining what you said with the previous question, a whole bunch of Catholic educators from the western states a couple of weeks ago out in California. And one woman who's a superintendent of a diocesan school said, I think I get it now. We could combine Catholic values with technology as a medium, and we might actually be able to expand our market share. And she was right on to the notion that what they need to do is to add the value equation to what's already happening with young people in their facility for learning, and to put frameworks around that, and to be coaches and guides in the process. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you want to, pick any scary book you want, from Fareed Zachariah's The End of the American Century to one of Tom Friedman's books, or just download that little 6-minute video that kids and the principal at Arapahoe High School in Colorado did a few years ago that they keep updating, called Did You Know? Just full of all of those absolutely terrifying statistics that are exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it ought to tell us that, Terry's right. You got to fundamentally recognize this is a revolution, and unlike a lot of the others, it's good.
Now, can I just add something? I think traditional education is based on textbooks, right? The textbook process is ridiculous, right? It takes years to get these things, revised and adopted, and it's just a terrible process. And online, these things can be updated very quickly. The software programs can be updated. Plus, in the future, there's going to be open source textbooks, right? And these things are going to be modified continually. It's going to be like a rolling process, right? So the contrast to today's textbook process is just going to be absolutely dramatic. And kids are going to get up-to-date information. They're not going to be trapped reading something that's old.
Thank you. Representing Marvin Klebb, Kansas. In the interest of incremental progress, to get buy-in from parents and teachers, is there a hybrid model where technology is used and teachers operate as proctors or tutors? And that might be a way to get this started so they don't see such a threat to their jobs. And is there a good example of that that we could use?
Yes, there are lots of them, and we've put out a promising practices report that is on blended and hybrid learning called The Best of Both Worlds, and it gives a whole series of examples of that. One of them is in Chicago. It's called Voice Academy, Virtual Opportunities in a School Environment, where you really have the best of blended hybrid learning using online learning, and the teachers supporting students in totally new ways that is really working well for the kids to move at any pace.
I think you can't emphasize enough what Terry said about both the regulation issue and the obstacles. I don't know of any examples where we've regulated our way to excellence. I mean, if you can name one, I will write it down and use it prominently as an example in the future. I don't know of any. But the problem is exactly what he said. For lawmakers to get the stuff out of the way that's stopping the market from working. Each of us can guarantee you with no reservation that demand will drive this change if we get the roadblocks out of the way. That's the policymaker's job.